Welcome to The Explainer. We're diving right in today because we've got some heavy, truly astounding material to unpack. Recently, an incredibly expansive and explosive interview surfaced featuring the testimonies of two survivors of the Jeffrey Epstein network, Beatrice and Juliet. We're going to break down these massive, multifaceted claims, look at exactly how this alleged exploitation network functioned, identify the high-profile figures they claim were involved, and explore how these survivors are finally breaking decades of silence.
Here is our roadmap to help us digest all of this information. We'll start inside the Predator playbook, move on to the 1993 Plaza allegations, travel to the island and Zorro Ranch, examine the global cover-up, and finally discuss the power of speaking out.
Part 1. Inside the Predator playbook. Let's look at the exact mechanics of how this high-profile operation allegedly functioned behind the scenes.
It was essentially the ultimate bait and switch. On the surface, you have this incredibly glamorous facade. Young women were being lured in with the promise of high-end beauty pageants, lucrative modeling contracts, and VIP travel. Sounds like a dream, right? But the private reality they described was something entirely different. Once isolated, the survivors allege it was characterized by coercion, international trafficking, and severe intimidation.
The survivors break this down into a highly systematic three-step grooming routine. Step 1 was the glamorous invitation, which was almost always presented as a totally legitimate career opportunity. Step 2 was the high-profile introduction. They'd place these women in the exact same room as billionaires, politicians, and celebrities just to build awe and trust. And then comes Step 3, the pushy pitch, where they would isolate the individual and aggressively pressure them to comply with the network's hidden agenda.
According to Beatrice, Epstein approached her with this chillingly calculated catchphrase, "I will take care of you." This single phrase was used repeatedly to target vulnerable women. They were essentially offered the world, flights, high-end accommodations, endless expenses, provided they just packed their bags and fully surrendered their autonomy.
Moving on to Part 2, the 1993 Plaza allegations. Let's really focus in on Beatrice's story.
Let's track how this all unfolded, turning a decades-old event into a modern revelation. Back in October of 1993, Beatrice, who is a Swiss banking employee and part-time model at the time, receives an invitation to a beauty pageant. Fast forward a month to November 1993, and she's at a press luncheon at the Plaza Hotel in New York. Beatrice claims it was right there that she was cornered and assaulted. But due to a massive culture of silence and intense intimidation, she kept this totally hidden. It wasn't until an October 2024 article in the Daily Mail that she finally broke her silence to the world.
Now, Beatrice makes some explosive claims about what she witnessed regarding the dynamic at that 1993 Plaza Hotel event. She states that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were closely interacting together. According to her account, Trump provided the access and the venue, while Epstein actively worked the room to recruit. In her own words, "They were playing with us. It was a game, a hunting game."
140. Just let that number sink in for a second. According to Beatrice's calculations in the interview, across just 3 different overlapping events in New York and Florida over a week-and-a-half period, there were 140 women. That represents the staggering amount of potential victims she claims could be cycled through this alleged system in barely over a week.
Part 3. The Island and the Ranch. We're going to shift over to Juliet's experiences across multiple continents.
Juliet alleges she was introduced to an absolutely immense, almost unbelievable scope of high-profile figures. We're talking politicians like Bill Clinton, financiers like Epstein himself, and huge entertainment figures like Kevin Spacey and Michael Bay. The source interview emphasizes that these VIP encounters were allegedly a deliberate tactic used to completely legitimize the operation in the eyes of young, starry-eyed recruits.
But for Juliet, that glamorous facade completely shattered the second she was placed on a private plane. She recalled the profound, overwhelming terror of that specific moment, saying, "I suddenly realized, oh my God, my family might never see me again." She realized she was completely trapped, isolated from the outside world, and entirely at the mercy of the people flying that plane.
Now, we all know the island gets most of the media attention, but our source material actually pivots to a highly secretive property in New Mexico. So we really have to ask, what exactly happened at Zorro Ranch? Because I'll be honest, the claims Juliet makes about her 2-week stay there are highly unusual and deeply disturbing.
According to the source transcript, Juliet reports a string of bizarre and traumatic incidents at the ranch. She claims she witnessed a UFO sighting, specifically a triangle of spinning lights, and she even alleges she saw Epstein briefly shapeshift into a demonic entity. But then her claims pivot to something chillingly grounded. She states she woke up in a medical laboratory surrounded by people in hazmat suits and reported being subjected to forced pelvic exams.
But amidst all of that darkness, there's actually a really fascinating visual connection that spans across the survivor community: the blue butterfly. Juliet notes she painted a blue butterfly on her diary way back in 2002. This was long before she ever knew that other survivors like Virginia Giuffre and Sarah Ransom had also adopted the blue butterfly as tattoos or in their artwork. It just spontaneously became this shared, powerful emblem of survival and solidarity.
Part 4. The Global Cover-Up. We are talking about systemic, international corruption here. The interview absolutely does not hold back on outlining what they call massive institutional failures. They claim that even to this day, the DOJ and FBI refuse to formally bring in and interview many of these survivors. The transcript also details allegations of decades of direct intimidation against victims to ensure their silence, alongside the existence of international trafficking routes actively funneling victims from places like Switzerland, Paris, and Eastern Europe straight into this American network.
Beatrice voices this really deep, resounding frustration with the whole situation, stating, "It makes you ask the right questions, also about our society. What are we about?" Because when you look at the sheer scale of the alleged cover-up, it strongly suggests this wasn't just a few bad actors. It points to an entire system that allowed these abuses to remain hidden for decades, seemingly just to protect the elite.
Finally, Part 5, the power of speaking out. This is where we focus on their mission for healing and driving societal change.
We are really looking at a massive paradigm shift today. Think about the enforced silence of the 1990s. Victims back then had no internet access and were almost always treated with immediate disbelief. Contrast that with the global solidarity we see today. Social media literally allows survivors to bypass those traditional gatekeepers, instantly connect with one another, and build worldwide support networks.
Beatrice actually offers some incredibly vital, actionable advice straight from the source for any survivors who might be listening. She urges them to seek out specialized therapists, to actively connect with legal teams, to find the courage to speak out when they feel ready, and absolutely, above all else, to refuse to carry the guilt. And that brings us to the core, most poignant message of this entire interview. Beatrice passionately declares, "We are not guilty. The guilt is on the other side." It's such a powerful demand. She is telling us to shift the shame completely away from the victims and drop it squarely onto the perpetrators and the systems that enabled them.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, we're left with a really critical question to ponder. How will these shattered silences finally break the vicious cycle of exploitation? The courage of survivors coming forward is clearly cracking the foundation of this alleged network. But will it be enough to bring about ultimate, lasting accountability? That is something we are all going to need to watch very closely. Thanks for joining me today, and keep asking the tough questions.